everyone. I know I have a big voice. My name is Sharita Sterling, and I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And I just want to thank all of you for coming out today, taking time out of your busy schedule to learn about an exciting project that we're unveiling today. We are here to discuss an important initiative that we hope will spur an economic effort in beleaguered communities around the country. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Black-owned banks that have served our community for generations. We have with us today experts as well as members or representatives from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation who's going to provide some perspective and some insight on exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So we have here Chairman Shaka Fattah from Pennsylvania's 2nd District, as well as he's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We also have our president and CEO, Shawnice Washington. We have with us also Michael Grant, the president of the National Bankers Association, and his chair, B. Doyle Mitchell, who's also the president of the Industrial Bank. Following Mr. Mitchell, we're going to have an economist, Russell Cashian, who is a professor at the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater. And then we're going to follow up with Ronald Busby from the U.S. Black Chambers. So let's get started. Congressman Fattah. And why don't we have everyone join up on the stage at the same time? I think that'll be a great showing. And we can get everyone to just come right on up. Thank you.
It also can be a way for all of us to be reminded to be brief. Starting, of course, with me. We are at the very beginning of our annual legislative conference, and we set this event as the first act of the conference because we think it signifies and symbolizes in very important ways the direction that the foundation is moving. So Junior Walker and the All-Stars had a song long ago. It says, "Your loving may give me a thrill, but it doesn't pay my bills." And the point here really is just that. The foundation wants to set an example. And we think the best way to do that is not rhetorically, but through action. And where we invest our money, we think will lay a pathway for others who want to follow and support the work of the foundation. So African American financial institutions play an extraordinarily important role in the ecosystem of the development of entrepreneurs in our communities. Also, to help families who are seeking to send a young person to college, or a group of people who are trying to organize and develop a religious institution, a family trying to buy a home or get a mortgage. These institutions are vital. In my hometown and throughout the country, they played an extraordinarily important role. And so the foundation today is announcing that an investment from my own reserves of $5 million, $1 million each to 5 banks geographically situated around the country, as an indication of our commitment and belief in these institutions, and also our knowledge that these institutions are the most likely institutions to help underserved communities. In fact, almost half of every dollar that they invest today goes to underserved communities. And you can't find financial institutions throughout our country that have a similar track record. So we're making an important announcement. I want to thank my vice chair of the board, Don Peoples, who is not here with us today but was a major inspiration for this work. And I'd like to also thank our great president and CEO, whose guiding hand you're going to see evident through all of the activities through the ALC conference. And Marcus Mason, who is our treasurer, who has the fiduciary responsibility for overseeing the financial affairs of the foundation. So I want to thank you for your work on this endeavor. So you're going to hear from a number of people, but I just want you to know that this is just the beginning. You will see also we have a enterprise pavilion for the first time this year, focusing on connecting up small businesses with economic opportunities. The foundation understands that the pillars of power have to be both political and economical. And we are leaning forward to say that we're going to make an investment, and we expect others who are our allies and our friends and who support the foundation to follow likewise. Now, these 5 banks are not the only African American owned financial institutions, but they are where we're starting at today. You're going to hear from some of our friends from the National Bankers Association, and we have representatives here from I know at least the Industrial Bank of Washington. But this is a great day and a great way to kick off the annual legislative conference, because we're about serious business, and there's nothing more serious than $5 million invested from our foundation in financial institutions that will then be able to use those dollars to make investments through their loan portfolios in communities that are underserved by traditional financial institutions. So thank you, and I'll step aside and introduce you the lady of the hour, the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and as chairperson, the person who I depend on to do the actual work of the foundation day to day, minute to minute, and you couldn't have a better person, Sharnice Washington.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. I am proud to stand here with my colleagues this afternoon to discuss the deliberate decision the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board of Directors has made to invest in the African American banking community. Our $5 million investment is part of a new effort at the foundation to strengthen the economy in Black communities. We saw a need and an opportunity to support much needed progress in economic recovery of African American communities, and we seized it. The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is making a $5 million investment in African American owned banking institutions as part of a broader effort to increase the availability of loans for businesses and individuals in the African American community. Because we represent African Americans throughout the country, we selected banks in 4 regions: North, South, East, and Midwest. And those 5 banks that Chairman Fattah mentioned earlier will receive $1 million each. Those banks include the Industrial Bank of Washington, D.C., Liberty Bank and Trust Company in New Orleans, Louisiana, Mechanics and Farmers Bank in Durham, North Carolina, Seaway Bank and Trust Company in Chicago, Illinois, and City National Bank of New Jersey in Newark, New Jersey. Today's announcement is truly historic. This investment is a critical initiative in lifting the economic fortunes of African Americans and minority communities. Historically and still today, minority and women-owned banks have been an important source of credit and accessible financial services. Minority-owned banking is key to reaching unbanked, underbanked, and financially underserved African American communities. However, these minority and women-owned banks have struggled significantly in the last 2 decades. African American owned banks decreased by 50% in the last 2 decades. Community development financial institutions like the 5 major African American community banks that CBCF is investing in are opening new branches in underserved communities and expanding access to checking and saving accounts, home loans, as well as small business loans. At CBCF, our mission is simple: bring minority consumers into the financial mainstream and empower them with the tools, knowledge, and access to become homeowners, entrepreneurs, and most critically, become financial independent. Our hope is that CBCF's investment in African American owned banks will draw the traditionally unbanked poor into the mainstream economy. This investment also recognizes the unique needs facing African American consumers. For example, females head half of African American households, With the sole breadwinner, these households face unique financial challenges, including difficulty meeting financial obligations and surviving economically. The CBCF's investment will help bring all households, including those headed primarily by females, into the financial mainstream. Today, 21% of all households nationwide have no relationship with financial institutions, according to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. This is simply unacceptable. Without fair access to the resources banks provide, millions are denied or deprived the opportunity to become homeowners, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. This historic $5 million investment is an important step towards achieving our goal of economic equality for all. We hope this liquidity deposit will spur others to make similar financial investments. The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is continuing our efforts to improve the socioeconomic circumstances of African Americans and other underserved communities. I'm looking forward to making our program stronger, more effective, and more efficient so financial institutions can continue to support our communities. Thank you so very much. And it is now my pleasure to bring to you the President of the National Banking Association, Mr. Michael Grant.
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank the leadership of the CBC Foundation, Chairman Fada, President Washington, and Money Whiz Mason. Thank you guys so much for putting the faith and confidence in these great institutions that have been serving our community since Reconstruction. Since it was founded in 1976, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has envisioned a world in which the Black community is free of all disparities. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus, dating back to greats like Shirley Chisholm, Parham Mitchell, Louis Stokes, Charlie Rangel, John Conyers, Ron Dellums, and others, have provided leadership in the United States Congress that served as an advocacy not only for African Americans, but for all poor and working class Americans who could not afford to pay for lobbyists to represent them. Today's announcement is a continuation of this bold leadership. As we have concluded nearly all the ceremonies commemorating the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, it is fitting that the African American leaders chart a new path for the next stage of our evolution towards first-class citizenship in this country. This next phase has to be about Black economic empowerment and the support of African American businesses from sea to shining sea. In his I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King referred to a promissory note. At that time in 1963, he declared that the note came back marked insufficient funds. Well, I've come today to extend his analogy. There is a great vault of opportunity. It is the collective wealth of the richest country on the face of this earth, even with our looming national debt. But the check this time will need 2 signatures to be bona fide. You see, with the first signature, this country made a $1 trillion down payment. This represents the disposable income of African Americans today. But in order to grow that to $2 trillion over the next 10 or 15 years, African American national organizations, wealthy individuals, and everyday consumers must make deposits in the great vault of opportunity, our Black and minority banks. This would be the second signature on the check. Since Reconstruction, these financial institutions have provided loans for small businesses, for first-time mortgages, and college tuition. These banks provided loans to Black churches when no other bank would do so. They are still the sources of loans to our businesses, and they give financial support to countless community organizations across this great nation. While we welcome the largesse of government through federal, state, and local procurement contracts, the African American community as a whole must follow the leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and begin to take seriously its own economic survival by investing in itself. Our Jewish, Asian, and yes, Ethiopian brothers and sisters have mastered a fundamental principle of growing group wealth. They circulate their money several times within their group before allowing it to make others wealthier. Dr. King was known for his prophecy. In closing, I would like to predict the future as well. If African Americans will significantly increase their support of black businesses in a single generation, we will witness a drastic reduction in unemployment, an increase in high school graduation rates, and a decline in crime in our neighborhoods. This is still the land of opportunity, but the responsibility for transforming opportunity to upward mobility rests equally on the shoulders of African Americans. I thank you. I now have the honor of bringing my chairman, Mr. Doyle Mitchell.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, I'm chairman of the NBA and also president and CEO of Industrial Bank. Industrial Bank is about to celebrate its 80th anniversary next year, and thank you. We got a few fans. I started in the bank as a kid, and one of the things that I always saw was how the bank was able to help people in the community. I used to ride along with my father on Saturdays, and he knew everyone in the community. He waved at everyone. He didn't turn anyone down. He didn't always know their names, but he always waved, and he was polite. As I started working at the bank at the age of 16, I realized how much the bank did every day to help people, African Americans, people that look like you and me. And as I got older and more professional within the bank, I saw how we did that through loans, through waiting on people that were opening accounts, providing technical assistance right in the branches, nothing formal, just helping and caring. As president of Industrial Bank, I have put the numbers together, and I see now, Mr. Chairman, we're not only reinvesting nearly 50% of our loans, over 50% of our loans that we make go into underserved communities, and nearly 80% of our loans go right here in metropolitan Washington. According to the FDIC, small banks or community banks make almost 50% of all small business loans. We know that small businesses in this country employ nearly 80% of all the companies, all the country's individuals. CDFI banks do even a greater job across the country, reinvesting even a greater portion of their assets right back in the community. African American banks are among them. We're among the many CDFIs that make it our business to reinvest through loans in our communities. Most of the communities served by African American banks are urban and disadvantaged. And while banks of other ethnic groups, Asians and Hispanics, do an excellent job at that, we do the same job right here in our communities, in African American communities. I watched Industrial Bank help thousands of people buy new homes, new cars, send their children to college, open and save businesses. And as I got older, I knew my colleagues around the country did the same thing. So it amazes me sometimes when people say, why is this important? It's important because African American banks around the country help hundreds of thousands of people over generations and generations. I still have people tell me, your grandfather gave me my first loan. Your father gave me my first loan. Doyle, do you remember when you helped my business out? I might say, no. But it's happened over generations, and those grandparents that we helped years ago now have grandchildren and children doing well at Harvard Business School, opening up large businesses and doing very well, making a very decent living. So as we continue our conversation, I just want to echo on what Mike said about reinvesting in our community. As we continue our conversation about spending our $1 trillion in purchasing power in the African American community, what we need to do is follow this example that the Congressional Black Caucus has set for us in reinvesting in our own. So therefore, I thank and I applaud Mr. Chair, President Washington, and of course my friend Marcus Mason, the local operative in the group in an effort to place these deposits into our banks and provide us the liquidity that we all need to reinvest in our own communities as we do so well. Thank you very much.
Now we're going to hear from a professor of economics at the University of Wisconsin, Dr. Russell Kashan.
Thank you very much. It's a blessing and a burden to follow these speakers. They basically said everything I was going to say. But as a professor, I have to talk anyhow, because we all know how we get. The one word that has come up in every single talk so far is faith. I've been tracking it. And it's about faith in people, and it's about faith in the financial system, and it's about faith in institutions. As an economist, I predominantly look at numbers and concern myself with dollars and cents. If you spend any time with me, I guarantee you I could bore you to death. But the reality is economics is more than about dollars and cents. It's about having confidence and faith in what's going on. And this action by the Caucus Foundation is a fantastic action of faith in sending out a statement to people all over the country that these institutions are worthy of their confidence. And so I wanted to make that comment before I made anything else. Minority-owned banks, and specifically black-owned banks, are a foundational business in America's urban areas. They serve several key roles. They provide banking services to areas that are often barren of any other mainstream banking service. And this is important because we hear about alternative banking, rent-to-own, ABC checking, loan title. And people say, well, they go the route of choice. And I'm an economist, I believe in choice. But if there's no bank in your zip code or in your neighborhood, you really don't have a choice. And so it's not about choice. And these institutions provide that opportunity and that choice for the public. They attract monies into the community through reasonably aggressive interest rates on CDs. They have an opportunity to encourage thrift in the neighborhoods, often impoverished neighborhoods, but neighborhoods that are encouraged to save. And they create a magnet by which to attract money into the community. Our research has shown that over the last 12 years, these institutions have regularly paid higher interest rates, whether it was prior to the financial crisis or subsequent or after the financial crisis. The interest rates they're paying on their CDs are higher. Finally, and most important to me, is there a source of valuable jobs with ladders for the neighborhood? I got into, as a professor, teaching money and banking, because as a young man, I would go down to my local bank and admire my banker. I was a pest. And I always wanted to be a banker. Instead, I became a banking professor, because if you can't do it, teach it. But these jobs are important because they're jobs with ladders. They have a future. They're tellers, they're mortgage originators, they're bank presidents. But they provide opportunity and growth for the community, and they provide role models and aspirations for the youth. And this is for me, an extremely important number that can't be quantified by economists. I'd like to thank Mike Grant for inviting me to speak today, especially because Mike saw my research, and it's available on my website if you ever want to read it. It's extremely boring. And I encourage you to support these institutions as they are they're a foundational piece of the community. Thank you.
I now want to bring up the leader and the CEO of the U.S. African American and Black Chamber of Commerce to talk about how the intersection of entrepreneurs and their banking relationships, how it all melds together, because this is not just an effort to help banks, but through the banks to help businesses. And this is the beginning step. There's a lot of money and it has to be managed in some way. It has to be deposited somewhere. And again, the foundation is not just acting. We expect our friends to act and follow our leadership in this regard. So if you're actually supportive of the work of the foundation, and you're a corporation or you're an institution with dollars that need to be invested, we want you to follow us in this direction, so that next year when we are here, we can talk about not just the foundation's investment, but we can show that others have joined in with us and that we have built up the capital capacity of these institutions. So I want to bring to you Ron Busby, who leads is the CEO of the Black Chamber, U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to say thank you to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for hosting this press conference. To Ms. Shanice Washington, Ms. Sharita Sterling Hernandez, Congressman Fattah, Dr. Cashian, and my two good friends, Michael Grant and Doyle Mitchell. Thank you for your grand vision and commitment to improving our communities. The U.S. Black Chamber consists of 112 chambers of commerce in 24 states, representing over 240,000 Black-owned businesses nationwide. We support our members through our 5 pillars of service: advocacy, access to capital, contracting, chamber development, and entrepreneurial training. With such a large scope, it is important that we continue to build partnerships and support from our community leaders like those that are on the stage here today. We applaud the actions of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for this symbolic investment. I say investment not in terms of an interest rate, but in terms of the significant impact it will have on the Black community. Black-owned banks have provided not only access to capital, but also the financial guidance necessary for entrepreneurs to start, grow, and even acquire new businesses. They provide the services that many Black-owned businesses either don't get from many majority banks or just cannot afford. The U.S. Black Chamber formed a national partnership with the National Bankers Association and has since built strong relationships with their 30-plus banks across the country. Immediately, the United States Black Chambers of Commerce took our first step and opened a business account at Industrial Bank, a Washington, D.C.-based Black bank led by our friend Doyle Mitchell, and a sign of our commitment. We understand the importance of leading by example, and so did the colleagues on the stage with me. I had the opportunity to partake in the message that the President delivered yesterday, and the thing that he said that struck my heart was to improve the economy. The way to improve the economy is to improve the middle class. The quickest way to augment the middle class is the expansion of providing new growth opportunities for small and minority-owned businesses. When we surveyed our businesses, the common concern they all had was access to capital. By this cash infusion of the $5 million deposited by the Congressional Caucus Foundation, it helps to provide the needed capital for our members to acquire the essential equipment and/or resources needed to grow their firms. If the number one concern for our businesses is access to capital, then the number one concern for our communities is unemployment. There are roughly 2 million Black businesses in the country and approximately 14% unemployment for African Americans. The African American unemployment rate is almost double the national average. If we can grow our firms to where they have the capacity to employ just one additional employee, we can quell the high unemployment that plagues our community. The U.S. Black Chamber is proud to support the message that this investment sends to Congress, America, and most importantly, Black America, that when we come together, we can truly solve our own problems. I challenge other nonprofits, both nationally and locally, and all other organizations headed by African Americans to follow suit and be the change we wish to see in our community. In the spirit of success, we say thank you from the U.S. Black Chambers.
Well, brevity is won out, and we have time for a few questions, and then we will conclude this press conference. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go right ahead.
Yes, good morning. Can you talk about how the 5 banks were selected, number one? And number two, will there be some sort of follow-up as the money's given? In other words, can we come back next year and say, we gave this money, this is the result, this is what's happened? 2 questions. Thank you.
Let me say, I chair the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation board, and the board took a decision under my leadership and with the strong, enthusiastic support of the vice chair of the board and with the fiduciary council of our treasurer, and we made an analysis that said that this was an appropriate action for the foundation, and we decided that we wanted a geographical diversity, and we made this initial step. This is a $1 million deposit in each of these banks, and they are geographically diverse, and they are sound financial institutions. And in terms of follow-up, the first follow-up is we don't intend to wait the next year. We're going to be encouraging those who are interested in the work of the foundation to follow our leadership. And that as they seek to partner with the foundation in other respects, we would like them to partner with us in this respect and to make investments. Because as I said, there are 2 basic pillars in terms of power in this nation. One is political, but the other is economical. And the first thing that we have to do is understand that a plane can't fly with just one wing. And we need to invest in our business development. And the way to do that is through strengthening these banks so that if someone wants a contract for janitorial services at this convention center, that they can get the loan they need to get the equipment they need so that they can function on such a contract, right? So it all works together. And but this decision is made by a private foundation that has been around for 4 decades, but is now under new leadership. And we've decided that we're going to invest not just in our words, but in our actions, and we're pointing a direction that we hope will provide leadership to others. Next, 2.
Malcolm Barnes, Washington Times. I have a question for Mr. Mitchell from Industrial Bank, our local black bank. $1 million doesn't go a long way. How do you plan to leverage that $1 million, and what can be expected in terms of impact, number of jobs created, loans to small and expanding businesses, and the biggest challenge in Washington is affordable housing?
Well, don't think that $1 million doesn't go a long way. My father used to say, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. So, you know, every bit counts, and every bit does make a difference. And the reason is because of our high rate of reinvestment in our communities, number one, but also in underserved communities as a CDFI, number 2. So, you know, every $20,000, $50,000, $150,000 loan can make a large difference. And as all African-American banks know around the country, you know, we need deposits, we need liquidity, and we need capital. So, you know, while it may sound like it's not $500 million, I would encourage everybody to you know, $5 million is nothing to sneeze at. So, you know, it's a lot of money, and a lot can be done with that money. We concentrate on small business loans. We concentrate. We do some affordable housing right here in D.C. We do a lot of commercial real estate, of which a lot of that is churches that have a very significant impact in our communities, owner-occupied, SBA loans, and sensible, I might add, home mortgage loans. And I probably should add, I probably just should add, to be a little self-serving, if you want to support Industrial Bank, our ATM is right downstairs.
Number 3.
Hazel Trice-Edney with the Trice-Edney Newswire. I covered last year when Mr. Busby with the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce made his deposit in the Industrial Bank. My question is this: how, as this movement grows, how do you quantify it? Michael, or anyone who can answer this question, how do we know that it's really trickling down? And the second question is, as it trickled down, what impact will it really have on the poor? I get the middle class, but what about poor people who are unemployed, et cetera? How do you impact their lives on a day-to-day basis?
Let me say two things. One is that Albert Einstein says you can't solve today's problems using the same level of thinking that you used when you created them, right? And then Malcolm X talked about how the economy in our country works, right? He said, you can't, the idea is you got to get a little bit of everybody's money. And then, as you heard from our bank president, the pennies add up to dollars, right? So what we're doing here is, this is a leadership organization. The foundation is singularly, I believe, one of the most respected organizations in this nation. We have some 42 members who are African American and in the Congress. The foundation brings together thousands and thousands of thought leaders and business leaders here for the annual legislative conference. And this is not a gesture of our $1 million deposit in each of 5 banks. This is a signal that we want others to follow, right? That we want all of the other organizations, all of our religious organizations, all of our businesses to move in the direction of aggregation of capital so that that capital can be invested in the needs and aspirations of the African American community and beyond the African American community, right? So that we're trying to, as Tiger Woods Foundation said, we're starting something, right? And we're lighting a fuse that we believe is going to have it's going to be a building block, right? To a new sense of what empowerment is all about. It's not just, can we go to the ballot box and vote? But it's also, can we invest in our own communities in ways that can be meaningful? And the way to do that is through a federally insured, sound financial institution. And there are, in the National Bankers Association, dozens of them. There's one in my hometown, right? And there's one in your hometown. And what we're trying to do is say, this is the direction that we're moving. It's not so much to go to the complaint window about what someone else is not doing. Now, Otis Moss gave the sermon for the Congressional Black Caucus prayer breakfast 21 years ago. And he said, don't come to Washington to the CBC, to the prayer breakfast, talk about what is the CBC doing or not doing. Get away from the complaint window, go to the claims counter, right? So what we're trying to do is move people in a direction in which people can empower themselves and they can empower their own communities through this investment. We'll take the last question, which is number 4.
Can I just add something to that?
Yes.
If you don't mind. Hey, Hazel, number 1, CDFI banks, we get certified by the Treasury Department, and the only way they make you a CDFI bank is if you already reinvest a significant part of your assets and your loan portfolio in underserved communities. So number 1, most of African American banks are certified as CDFIs, and so we do that already. Secondly, there's a firm out of Chicago that every year publishes a dashboard publication that shows where the banks that they track. And they don't just track African American banks, they track CDFI banks, and they highlight maybe about 20 of them every year. And they show, based on data, hard data, where their investments have gone into. So, and you don't get BEA grants and new market tax credits and things, FATA awards, without having done a significant portion of that. So there is data to support it.
Our last question is going to be number 4.
Number 4. This perhaps is a complaint, so I'll go to the claims on the next. What type of intestinal fortitude will the banks have when right-wing white organizations and coupled with hostile Jewish organizations exert pressure on black banks in dispersing the money where they think it needs to be dispersed, and perhaps also prohibiting certain black organizations, black individuals to lightning rods from putting money in the bank. All of you know the story with George.
And we're not doing speeches, we're doing questions. So go ahead. All right, let me say this. These banks have been operating, as you heard, industrial has been operating for 80 years. And the banks have boards, they have regulators, and they have regulations under which they operate. And as federally insured banks, they have to operate under a certain set of rules. And they have for decades. They will continue to. We're invested in them today. And I would invite anyone to make your own investment. In fact, you can even buy shares, and then you can ask them questions about their rules and regulations and how they proceed. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. And that was the last question. Half a question. Go ahead. Half a question.
Will the foundation be creating any kind of mechanism to track the investments at each of the 5 banks?
We have, under our fiduciary responsibility, we track all of our dollars, number one. And obviously, we have a stated investment plan. This is part thereof. And we have certain locked-in guarantees about rate of return. But it is not the only guide for our investments, but it is an important one, which is maintenance of principal. But we also are interested in, as any investor is, in a reasonable reward for our investment. Thank you all very much. Have a great ALC.